So I think I'm going to do something new with this video, and I'm going to be a little bit more edited. Today we're going to be looking at the new Valmonica archetype, and let's get right into it because this is a very interesting deck. First off, we have Angelo Valmonica. She is a dark level 4 fairy pendulum effect, attack 1200 and defense 2100, and a scale of 3. For the pendulum effect, each time you gain life points while there is a fiend monster card in your other pendulum zone, place one Kurormi counter on this card. Once per turn, when your opponent monster declares an attack, you can immediately after this effect resolves, link summon one Valmonica link monster. The monster effect is you can only use the first and second effect of this card's name each once per turn. If this card is in your hand, you could discard one other card, place this card and one Damon or Diamone Valmonica from your deck into your pendulum zones. During your main phase, if you control this card that was normal summoned or special summoned this turn, you could banish one Valmonica normal spell or trap card from your graveyard. This effect becomes that banished card's effect that gains life points when that spell or trap card is activated. This card is really interesting because you kind of need both of them in the pendulum scales to do anything, and being able to place this card and another into the zones, which is very good, but also if it's normal or special, you get to banish a spell or trap and gain that effect. Next up, we have Damon Valmonica. She is a light level 4 fiend pendulum effect monster with 1200 attack, 1200 defense, and is a scale of 5. Each time you inflict effect damage while there is a fairy monster card in your other pendulum zone, place one Kurormi counter on this card. Monsters your opponent controls lose 100 attack for each Kurormi counter on your field. The monster effect is you can only use the first and second effect of this card's name each once per turn. If this card is in your hand, you can discard one other card, place this card and Angelo Valmonica from your deck into your pendulum zones. During your main phase, if you control this card that was normal summoned or special summoned this turn, you can banish one Valmonica normal spell card from your graveyard. The effect becomes that banished card effect that inflicts damage when that spell or trap card is activated. So it's essentially the opposite, but it does almost the exact same thing as her other counterpart does, which is very, very cool. And honestly, I'm excited to see what the Link 1s do overall. Now let's get into the Link 1 territory. We have Jeremur, Alien God of Valmonica. It is a dark fairy Link effect monster, 2500 attack, and it is a bottom left arrow. And it takes one effect monster. This is super generic, but it must be Link summoned while 3 or more Kurormi counters are on a fairy monster card in your pendulum zone. Also, you can only special summon this card once per turn. So it has a restriction on top of a Sky Striker special summon restriction, which is absolutely fine. So I expect more Link monsters in the future from this deck. If this card is Link summoned, you can target one monster, or you can target monsters your opponent controls up to the number of Kurormi counters in your pendulum zones. Destroy them. You can remove 3 Kurormi counters from your pendulum zone. During each battle phase, this card can attack up to 3 times. This card's really solid as a pseudo boss monster, and honestly, I'm actually very excited for this deck because you have so many useful cards you can run in here, which I really do like. Next up, we have Bufila, Divine Angel of Valmonica. She is a light fiend Link effect monster, 2500 attack, bottom right arrow, one effect monster, and you must have 3 Kurormi counters on a fiend monster card in your pendulum zone. Also, you can only special summon Bufila, Divine Alien of Veronica, once per turn. So it's essentially exactly the same summoning requirements, but it's a different arrow. And if a card you control would be destroyed by battle or an effect, you can remove 3 Kurormi counters from your pendulum zones instead. Once per turn, you can target one of your Valmonica normal spell or trap cards that is banished during your graveyard. This effect becomes that spell or trap card's effect when that spell and trap card is activated. Another card that copies the spells and trap cards, so this is kind of like a spell book of knowledge, I think it is. Or one of the spellbook monsters that just copies effects, which is honestly is very interesting, and I am wondering what else this deck can do outside of just copying effects, burning, and on top of just gaining life points. Next up we have Veronica Versar, and it is a normal spell card. You can only activate one card with this card's name once per turn, outside of the copying effects. Apply one of the following effects, but if you control no Veronica card in your Pendulum zones, your opponent must choose the effect instead. Gain 500 life points, then you can excavate cards from the top of your deck until you excavated a Veronica card added to your hand. Also, after that, shuffle the remaining cards into your deck. Or take 500 and you can send one Veronica card from your deck to the graveyard, except Veronica Varis or Versar. This is an interesting card, as I think all the spells and traps have your opponent choose if you don't have the Veronica cards in your Pendulum zones. So that's a very neat aspect, as you can get info of what your opponent's playing, which is kind of funny, just off of this card alone. I really do enjoy that, but this deck seems a little gimmicky, and they're trying again with Pendulum monsters, but we'll have to see how that goes. For the other spell card, we have Veronica Intonaire. I'm sorry if I'm butchering these names, but I am not Italian or whatever they are, but it is another normal spell card, and you can only activate one card with a card name once per turn. Apply the following effect, but if you control no Veronica card in your Pendulum zones, your opponent gets to choose instead. Either gain 500 life points, then if you have a monster in your graveyard, you can special summon. Your opponent chooses one of the monsters, special summon it. So you get to special summon a monster from your graveyard, but then you just can, if your opponent can choose it. That's very interesting. Then the other effect is take 500 damage, then you can add one level 4 lower monster from your graveyard to your hand. That's very interesting. I can't wait to see what this can drum up, honestly, because being able to reborn something from the graveyard or get anything that's level 4 or lower back from the graveyard to the hand is very powerful, especially when you're recycling things like hand traps. That's going to be very interesting as a future tech option if you're running an engine with this deck. I could see it happening. Next up, we have Veronica Rhythm. It is a normal trap card, and you can only activate one copy of this card per turn. And if you control a Veronica monster card, use one of the following effects. If you control a Veronica Link monster, you can use both of these effects. Gain 500 life points, then destroy one spell or trap card on the field. Or receive 500 damage to your life points, then you could return one monster on the field to its owner's hand. So either you're going to be gaining 500 life points to destroy a spell or trap card, then you either receive 500 damage to be able to bounce something back to the hand. This trap could definitely be very useful, but I'll have to see some of the things that people come up with first. And we're also missing a card. It's most likely going to be probably a spell card, as we're missing number 35, and I want to know what that card does alone. Lastly, we have Veronica Medley, or Melody, I should say. It is a normal trap card, and you can only activate one copy of this card per turn. If you control a Veronica monster, use one of the following effects. If you control a Veronica Link monster, you could use both effects. Gain 500 life points. Veronica monsters you control cannot be targeted by your opponent's effects this turn. Or you receive 500 damage to your life points, then you can negate the effect of one effect monster your opponent controls until the end of the turn. This is one of the better cards because being able to just pay 500 to negate a monster effect and have multiple copies of it is very useful. And overall, this deck is very interesting, being a pay 500 and receive 500 damage to balance out what there is in the deck. But I want to know what you guys think about this archetype. I find it very interesting, and I cannot wait to see what actual people do with the deck. And I hope you guys did like this type of video, as I edited it more, and I had a lot of fun in doing it. But anyways, I've been Bolt Spider. See you guys in the next video, and goodbye.